My father came home from Vietnam in March of 1971. He was 23 years old. He came home on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, he was back in the house he had grown up in, sleeping in his old bedroom. And by the following Monday, he had a job at a hardware store 2 blocks from the house. That was it. That was the transition. 3 days, and then back to life, or whatever life was after that. He never talked about it. I want to be precise. Not almost never. Not rarely, in careful moments, with people he trusted. Never. In 38 years of being his daughter, I did not hear him say the word Vietnam in reference to his own experience a single time. There were no stories, no anecdotes, not even the fragments you sometimes hear from veterans. The funny thing that happened, the buddy who did something ridiculous, the one memory that had somehow calcified into something safe enough to share. Nothing. The war existed in my understanding only as a before and after. Before my father went, and after he came back, and the after was the only part I knew. He was not a cruel man or a cold man. I want to be clear about that. He was present in the ways he knew how to be present. At dinner every night, at my school events, in the driveway teaching me to parallel park, in the kitchen making eggs on Saturday mornings. He was there. He just was not. Open exactly. He had a quality of careful containment, like a house where all the windows are shut but the lights are on inside. You could see that something lived there. You just couldn't get in. He did not drink. He did not have the rages I have heard some veterans describe. He had nightmares sometimes. I heard them through the wall as a child, sounds I didn't understand and didn't ask about because children learn quickly what questions don't have answers. He startled at loud noises. He did not watch war movies. Those were the edges of it, the parts that leaked out. The rest he kept inside that shut house. He never complained. He never asked for anything. He went to work and he came home and he fixed things that needed fixing. And he sat in his chair in the evening and watched television, and on Veterans Day every year, every single year, he would say he was going to run some errands and he would be gone for 2 or 3 hours. And he would come back quieter than usual. And we did not ask where he had been. He died 2 years ago. He was 71 years old, and he had been at the VA care facility for the last 8 months of his life, after a series of small strokes that had taken his mobility first, and then most of his speech. He died on a February morning, quiet, in his sleep, the way some people who have spent a lifetime containing things finally let go all at once. The VA sent his belongings 3 weeks later. There were not many. His watch, which I had already seen and taken. His reading glasses, a photograph of my mother from when they were young, which she had not known he kept, a paperback book with the spine broken from reading, and at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a plastic bag, a metal tin, the kind that used to hold Christmas cookies, red with a faded pattern of holly on the lid. The tin was sealed with a rubber band. My father's handwriting on a piece of masking tape on the lid. Paula. My name. I held it for a long time before I opened it. Inside were letters, 38 of them, each in its own envelope, each sealed, each with a date written in the upper right corner in my father's handwriting. Careful, small, the handwriting of a man who had learned penmanship in a different era and kept it. The dates were all the same month and day. November 11th, Veterans Day, November 11th, 1971. The first year he was home. November 11th, 1972. November 11th, 1973. All the way through to November 11th, 2008, the year before the strokes began to take things from him. 38 Veterans Days, 38 years, 38 letters addressed to me that he had written alone on the one day a year the country asked him to remember, and sealed and kept and never sent. I was 3 years old in the first one. I opened it last. I opened them in order, which took me most of a weekend. I could only do a few at a time, and then I had to stop and sit with what I had read before I could go on. I opened the early ones first, the ones from before I was old enough to understand, and worked my way forward through my own life as he had watched it, one November at a time. The first letter, 1971, he is 23, home for 8 months, begins this way. Paula, you are 3 years old, and you don't know what I came back from, and I am going to make sure you never have to know. I have decided that, whatever I carry it myself. That is the deal I am making today. He was 23 years old, and he had made a decision to carry it himself. He kept that decision for 38 years. The early letters were the hardest to read, not because they were graphic. He was not graphic, even in letters he never intended anyone to read, but because of the age of him in them. He was 23, 24, 25. A young man, younger than I fully understood my father to have been, sitting alone on Veterans Day with a piece of paper and writing to a child who was learning to read, who was learning to ride a bike, who had no idea what he was. He wrote about things he had seen, not in detail. He never wrote in detail, but in the way of a person who needed to put words to something, even if the words were approximate, even if they fell short. He wrote, "There are things I saw that changed the shape of how I understand the world. I don't know another way to say it. The shape changed. I am trying to live in the new shape, and most days I can manage." He wrote about my mother, about how she helped him, not by understanding because she couldn't fully understand, but by not requiring explanation, by letting the shut house be shut without pressing at the windows. He wrote, "Your mother has never asked me to be something I can't be. That is a specific grace that I don't think I have thanked her enough for." He wrote about me, in every letter, about the specific me of that particular year. In 1978, I was 10, and apparently I had recently lost a spelling bee that I had been expected to win and cried about it. And he wrote, "She cried today about the spelling bee, and I sat next to her on the couch, and I didn't say much because I don't know what to say to crying. But I put my hand on her back and she leaned into it, and I thought, that is what I came home for. That right there." In 1982, I was 14 and going through the worst stretch of adolescence. Difficult, angry, certain my parents understood nothing. He wrote, "She is 14 and she has decided I am useless," which is approximately correct in the ways that 14-year-olds need their fathers to be useless so they can become themselves. I am trying to be usefully useless. I am trying to be in the room without being in the way. In 1986, I left for college, and he wrote, "The house is very quiet. Your mother and I are learning to be 2 people in the house instead of 3. I drove past your school last week for no reason, just to drive past it, just to know where you were." In 1991, when I got married, he wrote, "I walked her down the aisle today. He had crossed out 2 attempts at a description and written simply, she was everything. I have been trying for 20 years to be a father she could be proud of. I don't know if I managed. I know I tried every single day." I set that letter down and I looked at the ceiling and I tried to breathe. He had tried every single day. He had been trying every single day of my life, trying to be present without burdening, trying to be a father without handing me the weight of what he carried, trying to give me something clean and whole while managing the part that wasn't clean and wasn't whole entirely on his own. Every Veterans Day, alone, somewhere in the house or somewhere outside it. I still don't know exactly where he went on those afternoons, whether he drove somewhere specific or just drove. He sat with it, and he wrote to me, and he sealed the letter, and he put it in the tin, and he came home quieter than usual. He never gave me a single one. The last letter was from November 2008. His handwriting was slightly less steady than the earlier ones. The strokes had not begun yet, but something had started to change. He was 60 years old. He wrote, "Paula, I have been writing to you for 37 years. I don't know if I will be able to keep doing this. My hands are not what they were, and some days the words are harder to find. I want to say something in case this is the last one, in case you find these someday and read them and wonder. I want you to know that you were the best reason I had to come back. Not the only reason. I would have tried to come back regardless. But the best reason. You were 2 years old when I left, and I carried your face with me the entire time, and when I came home and saw you in the yard and you ran to me like you had been waiting, like you knew exactly who I was, even though I had been gone for most of your life at that point. I thought, all right, that's it. That's the whole answer. Everything I have been able to do since then, all of it, every day, every year, I did it because of that moment. A 2-year-old girl running across a yard. That is the whole of my life. That is the reason for the shape of everything. I have never been good at saying this out loud. You know that. I hope you know it wasn't because I didn't feel it. I felt it every day. The words were always somewhere I couldn't reach. So I put them here instead. I put them here every year. In November, when the country remembers, and I remember, and I needed somewhere to put it. I hope you find this. I love you, Paula. Dad. I sat on the floor of my living room and I held that letter and I cried for a long time. Not quietly, not the contained kind, the kind that has been waiting a long time and finally has somewhere to go. He had carried it alone for 38 years. He had sat alone on Veterans Day, on the day the country puts out flags and thanks veterans and moves on. And he had written to me. He had written about the shape that changed and the 2-year-old girl in the yard and the trying every single day to be a father she could be proud of. He never told me he was proud of me. I want to be honest about that. He never said it. Not once in 38 years of being my father did he say the words out loud. I had grown up understanding this as simply who he was, the shuthouse, the contained man. And I had made my peace with it, or I had believed I had. I had not understood that he was saying it every November. Alone. In letters I was never meant to find until he was gone. My daughter is 11 years old. She never met my father well. She was too young when the strokes began, and by the time she was old enough to have real conversations with him, he had lost most of his words. She knows him from photographs and from stories I have told her, which until now were incomplete stories, stories without the interior life. I have started telling her the fuller version, not everything. She is 11, and some of it belongs to a time and experience too large for 11. But pieces. I told her about the tin. I told her about the letters. I told her that her grandfather was a quiet man who loved very loudly on the inside and found one day a year to write it down. She said, "Did he know you would find them?" I said, "I think he hoped so. I think that's why he kept them." She thought about that. She said, "Do you wish he had given them to you while he was alive?" I thought about that for a long time. I said, "I think he gave me what he could. And I think what he couldn't give me out loud, he put in that tin. And I found it. And I have it now." She nodded. Then she said, "I think he was brave." I said, "Why?" She said, because he kept going. Even when it was hard, he kept going for 38 years. She is 11 years old, and she is exactly right. He kept going. Every November, he sat down with a piece of paper and he told me what he couldn't say out loud, and he sealed it and he kept going. 38 years. I have the tin on my dresser. I have read every letter twice, and I will read them again. My husband read them after me. I didn't ask him to. I left the tin on the kitchen table one evening and went to bed early. And when I came downstairs in the morning, he was sitting at the table with the letters spread out in front of him in order, and he had been crying. My husband is not a man who cries easily. He had his hands flat on the table on either side of the letters, and he was looking at them with the expression of someone who has just understood something large. He said, "Paula." I said, "I know," he said. "He wrote these every year." I said, "Every year." He looked at the letters. He said, "I met him 30 times maybe, 35. And I thought he was just quiet. I thought that was just who he was." I said, "It was who he was, but this was also who he was." He picked up the letter from 1991, the year we got married. He read it again. I watched him read the part about walking me down the aisle, about the word everything with 2 crossed-out attempts before it. He set it down carefully. He said, "Do you think he knew I would be good to you?" I said, "I think he watched you carefully for a long time before he decided." He nodded slowly. He said, "I wish I had known. I would have told him. I would have said something." I said, "I think he knew." My husband sat with those letters for a long time that morning. He read them out of order after a while, picking up whatever his hand found, the way you sometimes need to approach something from an angle rather than straight on. I made coffee, and I sat across from him, and we were quiet together in the way of 2 people who have been married long enough that silence is a form of conversation. He said eventually, "What do you want to do with them?" I had been thinking about that. There were a lot of things I could do. Frame the last one, the one from 2008, the one that felt most like a message meant to be found. Put them in a box and keep them. Read them once a year on Veterans Day, the way he had written them. I said, "I want to share some of them, not all, some." My husband looked at me. I said, "There are men sitting in VA waiting rooms right now who came home from somewhere and never talked about it, who are sitting across dinner tables from their children every night and can't figure out how to say the thing. I want them to know. I want someone to know that my father found a way. It wasn't the way anyone would have chosen. It was a tin and 38 letters and silence. But he found a way, and the people he was doing it for found out. I shared 3 of the letters. I won't say where or how. That's a private decision, and this is already more than I expected to share. But I shared 3 of them, pieces of them, with their hearts intact. And the responses I received from daughters and sons of veterans, from veterans themselves, from people whose fathers had come home changed and quiet and unreachable, told me I had done the right thing. One message I received I think about often. It was from a woman in her 60s. She said, "My father was also Vietnam. He also never talked. He died 15 years ago, and I never found any letters. But reading your father's words, the part about the shape that changed and trying to live in the new shape, I finally understand some things about my father that I have been trying to understand for 40 years. Thank you for that. I mean that completely." I wrote back to her. I said, "I think your father was trying too. I think the trying is in all of them, even when you can't see it, even when they can't show it." She said, "I'm going to choose to believe that." I said, "Me too." My father came home from Vietnam in 1971, and he made a decision. Whatever he carried, he would carry himself. He would not hand it to the people he loved. He would contain it and manage it and live inside the new shape of things, and he would give his family what he could give them, which was presence and steadiness and eggs on Saturday mornings and hands on the back of a crying child and a man in the yard when you ran to him. He gave us what he could. What he couldn't give us, he put in the tin. Every November 11th. Alone. For 38 years. My daughter is growing up knowing this story. Not all of it. She will get more of it as she is ready for more of it. But she knows the shape of it. She knows her grandfather was a man who came home changed and found a way to love very loudly in a very small tin, and that the tin was waiting, and his daughter found it, and now it sits on a dresser in a house where his granddaughter grows up. She asked me once if I was sad that he hadn't given me the letters while he was alive. I thought about it honestly. I said, sometimes. Sometimes I'm sad about the conversations we didn't have, about the things I could have said to him if I had known what was in there. She said, "What would you have said?" I said, "I would have told him that the shape was okay, that whatever shape he was my father, and that was enough, that I never needed him to be different. I just needed him to be there." She said, "But he was there." I said, "He was there." She said, "Then maybe he already knew." She is 11 years old. She is exactly right. He was there every single day. He wrote it down 38 times, so I would have the proof. November 11th, every year, alone. He kept going. The tin is on my dresser. I keep going too.